I had some video to show about the gangster from the news, which we're not going to show now because we've just had the chat instead. But there was a part at the end of the conversation which really kind of surprised me. There's been a new police minister announced, Richard Chambers, and the reporting on One tonight hinted very strongly that he might be in favour of bringing guns into the police. Just have a listen to this part of the report. Again. Listen to what he says.
Our new police commissioner has only just returned from overseas, where he's been working in France with the global crime fighting organisation known as Interpol. And the new police commissioner says, look, during his time overseas, he's realised that policing all around the world is becoming more volatile. And one of his top priorities is to keep frontline police officers safe. He thinks it's time for a bit of a discussion about the tactical equipment that they have available to them. He said, he's open to having discussions about whether it's time for our police officers to start wearing body cams. He said he's also open to talking to them about whether police officers would like to be carrying firearms more regularly. Now, he said also, having worked overseas, he's noticed a real declining trust in police around the world, and he doesn't want New Zealand to go that way. He said, in order for that not to happen, it's vital that police respond to crime when it's happening. He also talked a little bit about the crime that New Zealanders are experiencing. Here's what he had to say.
It's true that New Zealanders have experienced more crime, particularly when it comes to fraud and scams and other forms of internet-enabled crime. So, the reality is that we can become victims of crime as a consequence of actions outside of our country. And it's important to realise that, of course, that makes people feel unsafe.
Now, I thought that was an interesting choice of words because, of course, he was standing next to the police minister, Mark Mitchell, who's promised to resign this year if
Mark Mitchell.
The public don't feel safer under his watch. Speaking of which, I asked the new police commissioner what he made of the National Party, including Mark Mitchell, repeatedly attacking his predecessor, Andrew Costa, calling him soft on crime, even calling him a wokester. The new commissioner said, no, I'm just focused on the future. When I asked if he was ready for the political heat that will inevitably come with this job, he said, absolutely.
I mean, when we talk about the Trumpian moves that maybe this government's made, doesn't that just sound like one? Pointing to a public servant and abusing them, calling them woke or whatever you want to do. Pretty ridiculous. But anyway, in that, tactical gear, possibly guns. I like the idea of body cams. I think every police officer should carry a body cam without question. But, you just kind of go possibly talking about carrying guns more often. I'm like, I've been overseas and I've seen how dangerous it is. So we should arm our police officers to the same sort of level. I know he's not saying that, but the extrapolation is, shall we?
Our police are almost, you could almost consider them up.
Always in the boot, eh?
Always in the boot, under lock and key. And I think there is, it's a paper thin difference, but I think it's a really important one. That you don't have your first option to be a deadly one. Like, you've got pepper spray or tasers or whatever, sure. But I think if you've got a gun on your hip, I mean, you do see them in places like airports and stuff like that. But I think, like, giving up that thing of seeing a police officer and not automatically seeing a deadly weapon on their hip, the whole time, is an important distinction. They're there. I think if we go down that stage, then the training needs to be much, much higher. It is hard to hit what you're aiming at with a pistol at anything more than 10 or 30 meters. And in a high stress environment, that goes out the fucking window as well, unless you are incredibly well trained. And I think you end up going down that pathway of, if criminals know a police officer is going to be armed with a firearm whenever they see one, then they respond in kind.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment with firearms, like, police are regularly confiscating firearms. And I think they're just chunking through the illegal trade and just scooping up as many as they can.
Yeah.
I think rather than going, police are facing more criminals with firearms, they need to bring in the anti-firearms measures that the government is trying to stop. So we don't have to have our police officers armed at all times.
And I think the idea of police are pretty much armed now. They've got a gun in the boot. You've also got this government kind of working on getting more police on the beat, and obviously police on the beat aren't near a car. They're just walking. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? If the police are more armed, will the gangs be more armed? Are the gangs more armed? So the police needs to be more armed, and will that cause the gangs to be more armed? Or the criminal element doesn't have to be a gang. And I think we've still got a pretty safe country, pretty safe for the police. But I did notice he also used the word tactical gear. I mean, when someone says that, I think about America. I think about, they basically have tanks to ram raids with and that kind of stuff. Like, what does that mean in New Zealand context about fitting out our police with more tactical gear?
I don't think we have to really worry too much about that. Like, America's whole situation of the militarization of their police comes straight from their military and the Homeland Security Act, and that's a whole another kettle of fish. But yeah, like I'm all for safety equipment for police, like stab-proof vests, all of that sort of stuff. All that you should be safe at work, and that applies to cops as much as anybody else. I'm a big fan of body cams that officers cannot fuck with, cannot turn off, that sort of thing. That has been a game changer in parts of the US.
Yep.
I think that's a really, really important thing. Arming cops on the regular day-to-day, absolutely not.
Yeah,
absolutely not. If a mistake can be made and it's deadly, no.